Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. And I'm here to present 25 years of knotweed work on the Hoh River. And I want to give gratitude to the team from 10,000 Years Institute who helped pull this together, Mike and Alana and Olivia and Devin. And and Blake from our team are in the audience. They are participants. And then Lauren Keeney worked with me to pull our research together, and we'll talk more about that later. So today I'm going to present a quick overview of us and where, how, and what we've learned in 25 years, the history on the Hoh River, of all the evolution that we've created of methods and practices, how we collect our data, and how that contributes to research on species. Building programmatic support, big part of what I do as the executive director. How we've been integrating other species in all of our knotweed work. And key takeaways, how to communicate cost to benefit so that we can build programmatic support, and also the message to send to everyone that it will never be over. So educate and advocate for continuous work. And the 10,000 Years Institute started 34 years ago at the University of Washington, and I hired them when I was the Hoh Tribe's habitat biologist to help me pull together an applied research program. Sorry, I didn't turn on my video. I'm going to do that now. An applied research program for the Hoh River. And since then, we've been working to integrate practices to restore and protect forests and the watersheds that we work in and sustain us. And we do a lot of applied research, restoration, and jobs in stewardship development, working a lot on regenerative practices. So one of the things that has allowed us to be as effective in invasives work, which is foundational to all the other aspects of landscape and natural resources management, is creating a program that crosses boundaries around the Northwest Olympic Peninsula and along the coast. And we've been able to get funding under the Washington Coast Restoration and Resiliency Initiative, which is a Recreation and Conservation Office program, for the last 5 biennia. We're actually going into our 7th biennial proposal. And so that gives us enough funding to hire up to 25 staff year round. And we work on everybody's land, and we follow sources, pathways, and vectors. We develop a lot of partnerships and plans for each species, and we do protocols, and we show up. So we're on everybody's land: federal, state, county, city, tribal, private, nonprofit, all the way up and down. And I'm going to focus on the Hoh River with the presentation today, because that's where I got started on knotweed in 2001 and have been working on the same clump that started at River Mile 29.75 at an old homestead. And so it's 90 kilometers or 56 miles of river on the Hoh, draining the Hoh Glacier on Mount Olympus, which is melted back by about 85 to 90% with climate change. And the rainforest is famous worldwide. We get over 500,000 visitors up to the rainforest in the Hoh River every year. It's a World Biosphere Reserve. I'm sure many of you have been there, and please do drop by and see us if you come out. And we have all wild fish on the Hoh, all 13 species, 13 populations of 8 species, and it's famous for that. And been working for a long time to keep it healthy. And that is a pretty representative picture of what the upper river looks like, with lots of wood in the river, lots of gravel coming out of the melting glaciers, and forested hill slopes, and alder and mixed forest on the within the channel migration zone. The water really is blue. Didn't change. We don't change that. It's the glacial melt, except when it has clay or glacial flour in it and it gets gray. or landslides. So there's another picture looking upriver from about river mile 30 across the very wide channel migration zone, which is almost a half mile wide in many places. And the South Fork Hoe is coming in from the right side of the picture, the main stem hoe coming in from the left, and the glaciers are melted back. You can see the roads going up in on state lands with the alder crossing, and these landslides are bringing species like Scotch broom into the river that we have to go out on the bars to get over and over and over again. And there are openings in these islands that show where the Scotch broom has been removed, and there's cryptogamic moss mats that get left, and it's really hard to recover native plant succession there. Here are some photos over the years. Christine, way back in 2009, with what we called a really big knotweed patch. One of the benefits of doing this on the Hoh River is that we got started when the first clump from the homestead moved. We got started within 2 years after that. And we have very few private landowners on the Hoh River, so there's just not a lot of land ownership like Justin in King County and other folks in all of the Puget Sound watersheds and many of the East Side Olympic Peninsula watersheds deal with. So we have a lot of public lands, and the Nature Conservancy also bought over 7,000 acres in the Hoh. So we have a lot of access. But the bottom photo on the left is me on the Dickey, where a lot of homesteads over the years planted giant knotweed. That was, I think, 2003 or 4, working with the Quileute tribe there. It's still chock full of knotweed all over, coming up in many places in the Dickey River, particularly, and on the Quileute. But we've learned a lot since 2004. That's when Lauren Ergensen did her research on knotweed, which has been really helpful in getting funding over the years and establishing programs. And one of the challenges has been the chia pets. This is a rhizome that was 8 feet long and 5 feet wide that would get buried and unburied, scoured and exposed, and we would get the chia pet little leaves all over it, and there was just no way to apply enough herbicide to get down into those rhizomes. But that's where I learned about rhizomes and how long they can last and how deep they can sprout from. So we're still getting little itty bitty plants like this. This is a lot of what we look for now in our searches. And this on the right on the top was in October, just before when it started raining, and the winter rains, we get 140 inches on a normal year, 240 up in the mountains. So we're wet, and where I'm standing, the river will be over my head in a month or so, going up and down. And so this little plant came up, and there were 5 of us. We dug down around it and got it down, and I realized how long the roots were, and that every fragment about 2 centimeters long can produce a new plant. So that's another place I learned a lot about knotweed. And we searched for tiny little sprouts like this, but of course there's probably a big rhizome underneath it. That was at the bottom of a 10-foot high log jam in one spot. And then Jonathan talked about airboats. Jonathan, thank you for bringing the airboat out to the Hoh River the one time. The crew loved it. That's Devin grinning big, and Bonnie Eyestone from the Quinault Indian Nation behind me. I hated the airboat, but the crew loved it. So we don't use boats much, except to do guided raft or drift boat trips down the difficult parts of the river to get to. And we've done a lot of training over the years. And it used to be we had knotweed crews 4 months to 6 months a year, train them all up and get them out, work with them. And then I'd have to lay them off, and they would go find other jobs. And so over the years, we have learned to do many species, and Scotch broom keeps us working all winter long. So our crews are 12 months a year now. And that keeps the training in-house, which is really helpful. And you all can see the little knotweed plant that's below my hand there, a little bit farther out, that's in the floodplain on the Hoh Reservation. So on the Hoh River, lots of disturbance, lots of channel migration, lots of gravel coming in, and the retreating glaciers are increasing that gravel sediment movement through the watershed, which builds up the main stem river, which causes it to avulse back and forth. So we've been having those long atmospheric river events, and then there's a lot of bank erosion and the movement of sediments, which of course facilitate the movement of invasive plant propagules. And this slide I've done in the past for Scotch broom, but it's effective also for knotweed. All of these places have knotweed in them, except for maybe the harvest units in the upland or the gravel mines, although some of those have them too. And so landslides often bring invasives into the rivers, and channel migration, of course, brings them all over. And then we get little knotweed sprouts from propagules that get dumped behind the large wood that ends up on the gravel bars or in jams in the river. But that floodplain large wood cycle is getting a lot of attention these days in restoration circles, keeping the ability of riparian forests and hill slopes to maintain the successional cycles of plants from willow to alder to mixed conifer and deciduous to large and old mature conifer with understory, so that the mature conifer ends up falling into the river, or the mature cottonwood or big leaf maple ends up falling into rivers and forming the structures that allow deep pools to be scoured, and gravel to be sorted and new bars to form. That's the large wood cycle. And we know, all of us who work in invasives, whether it's knotweed or Scotch broom or reed canary grass or any of them, we know that those stop that cycle from happening. And if you try to go in to replant, you're fighting an uphill battle. It's challenging. So what we do in the Hoh and all the rivers that we work in, the 8 large watersheds we work on the Olympic Peninsula on the coast, is work to do EDRR, get rid of small populations, including individual plants, early, and to go back persistently and continuously to keep that large wood cycle able to function. There's that knotweed plant. I forgot about that arrow. So on the Hoh River, we're working on the lower 30 miles of the river. The river is 56 miles to the glacier. And we have been doing the whole river since 2004. We started knotweed in 2001. And those are just the points from January to October in 2025. And so it's about 4,000 acres that we cover. And when we were doing knotweed in the beginning, there was a lot of knotweed. We could find it. You could basically see it from space. I mean, it wasn't huge populations, but now it is down. Let's see, I'm going to move this out of the way so I can see. It is down to, let's see, Bohemian knotweed in 2025. We had 66 sites, which means it could be an individual tiny plant that added up to 1/10 of an acre spread across the entire watershed. And we had 2 sites of Japanese knotweed and a little bit of giant knotweed. And so we're covering 4,000 acres doing other plants most of the time. We find the knotweed as we're doing it, and we end up treating it in September and October, hopefully before the rains. And so this was just to say that we're mostly at this point just doing imazapyr at 1%, as Justin presented. But before 2011, we were mixing, like everyone else was doing, I think it was 4% glyphosate and 1% imazapyr, or we did glyphosate injection or spray. We do not cut or dig. We know what injury does to knotweed, in that it will go out 10 feet or so in every direction and resprout all around. So we've learned not to do that. I know that on small populations, it's possible to do it. This is where the original, where that red arrow is, that was a homestead on the Hoh River, just below the South Fork Hoh, and that's where the original clump of knotweed was planted. And in 2001, or between 1999 and 2001, a 100-year flood event avulsed the river into an old side channel and grabbed that clump that my Jobs in the Woods displaced timber worker stream typing crew had come in 1999 to tell me about, and I didn't know what the plant was then. And that spread it all the way down the river within a few years. So that's the monitoring and control area that we've been working on all these years. And in 1990, let's see, 1999, 2000, about 2003 or 4, I was saying, well, we've done 99% of everything that's here and we'll be done in 2 years. Wrong. 22 years later, we're still chasing pieces of the original clump all the way down the river, but not very many of them. So here's a picture from, actually, this is not the Hoh River. This is actually confluence of the Quileute and Bogachiel River. There's everlasting peavine or Lathyrus latifolia and Scotch broom and knotweed growing together. And this peavine, I didn't put this in this presentation, but this is the species that we're freaking out about right now because it is also a woody rhizomatous plant, and there's many 8 feet of gravel and then the hyporheic zone below, which is why knotweed is so difficult to kill as well. So crew hours between May and September on the knotweed, that's the knotweed cycle. We did over 5,000 hours and over 2,500 acres surveyed to treat 215 acres of plants. And of that, it was about 0.15 acre of knotweed mixed in for the hoe. And here are some of the pictures from 2025. And so there is knotweed coming back up in floodplains that we've treated over and over again. This is at the mouth of the Hoh River on an island just off the Hoh Reservation on the left bank. The Pacific Ocean is about a half a mile out from there. This is way high up, right here on Lindner Bar, actually, in the floodplain forest on a homestead property. This one is up on an island at another homestead property, high up at about River Mile 27. And then this one's on the river bank, and we always expect these to get scoured out and spread. So they're challenging to try to get early and often, but if you get them early enough and often enough, you're not actually killing them. So we have to wait for the right timing on all of that. And you can see how it comes up again through different substrates. So lots of different types of habitats to survey through and lots of different strategies to be able to find it and flag it and be able to come back to it. So again, this is the original site where the arrow is, and that was 1999 that the river channel captured that side channel and moved it downstream. And that island, this particular point right here with Kevin spraying it in, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go forward. Kevin spraying it in the floodplain, the alder bottom there. This was another homestead that became an island in the river. It wasn't when it was originally the homestead. That wasn't there for 8 years and came back after 8 years. And so that's the sort of thing that we're finding generally with knotweed on the Hoh River or in places that have really deep substrates. It's really hard to kill what's above ground. Here are a couple of other photos from around on the river and different conditions. So gridding through willow and alder thickets and figuring out how to do different pacing for the crews that have to go through the thick stuff with wood buried in it and the open areas. There's different strategies for that. Different strategies for dealing with the floodplains, forests with lots of salmonberry. Luckily, we don't have too much blackberry on the Hoh in most places, so we're not dealing with the thorns mostly. There's Blake having found one knotweed plant in all of that, and that's the plant with the red flag on it. We worked with correctional camp crews. This was an 8-foot high log jam bashed up against a dog leg curve in the Hoh River. So you just see there's a lot of wood, there's a lot of ground to cover, a lot of back and forth, and always going back and back and back. I think this was probably about 2007. And so our funding, so many, thanks Jonathan for presenting and talking about the Knotweed program. So many partners and grants written and continuing to work ahead to try to see how long we can pull together 2-year programs in which many of them require 10 years of monitoring after on a species that lasts decades, and create the understanding that you're never done. Way back when we started, after we got BIA funding when I was at the Hoh Tribe, and then we got Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery funding at the Hoh Tribe, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation money funding after the Hoh Tribe, and then WSDA's Knotweed program. Thank you. And through 2010, and since then, just bouncing around to that. And as we're doing this, of course, we're finally having to start treatment on other species because I'm walking behind the crews taking all the data on the Trimble unit. And I'm having to just dash back and forth trying to pull a tansy ragwort here and trying to pull out a Scotch broom seedling there. And then finding reed canary grass really turned my head around because I was seeing it on other watersheds. And that's me on a really important off-channel habitat at Elk Creek in the Elk Creek floodplain. That's me reaching up to get a seed head off of a floret off of a stem. So the stems are 8 feet tall. We found them 12 feet tall in the quinault and queets and quileute and hoe. So we're still working on reed canary grass, but we're getting a handle on it. The Hoh has probably the least of any river in the state. And continuing to apply for funding and getting funding, and you see that the WSDA funding is popping back and forth. And then the surfboard started funding Knotweed because of Jim Hargrove, the Quinault Indian Nations forester, who was also a state senator, and is still on the planet. Thank you, Jim. He got the surfboard to incorporate knotweed into a program and into grant funding for salmon recovery. So since then, we've been under the Wick Reef project, and we are doing many species, many acres, and lots of work still on the Hoh and all the others. And we also do biocontrol distribution, thanks to Jen Andrews and the WSU program. We do biocontrols for Scotch broom, tansy ragwort, St. John's wort, and Canada thistle. And the Scotch broom has really started to take off. And we have to inform all of our partners. So I said integration into other projects earlier. One of the big aspects of our program has been to get invasives integrated into development and restoration, road construction. Every aspect of landscape management has an invasives intersection. And in particular for salmon recovery or for watershed restoration programs, water quality, amphibians, invasives are key to the success. Revegetation projects. If you have invasives there and you're trying to plant in invasives, you're going to have a really hard time getting your plants going and keeping them going. So we do a lot of education about how these species propagate, how many seeds they have per plant, what the viability is, whether they're annual or rhizomatous or perennial, biennial, and rhizomatous. And we talk about how much time you have to prepare a project for, and then how long you should plan to go back. And that has a lot of information also relevant to where equipment should be staged and whether or not you need equipment wash stations. And I'll bet most of you if you even have folks washing equipment, you're like counting blessings. It's really rare and it's expensive and it's resisted. And on the Hoh River, you can have equipment working in 5 different sites with 5 different sets of different invasive plants that are moving seeds between them that we've just been in multiple times. So we've started to get pretty serious about that. And we're also thinking about allelopathy, and trying to get more information about allelopathic chemicals and understand that better. And then we talk to folks about when the site access and treatments are the most efficacious. So we create these tables and help and present them to our partners and to folks who are doing road construction or bridges or culvert replacements or whatever, in the areas that we're treating. We also created this table for the same, just to talk about risks and hazards. And so for knotweed, you've got all of these hazard types of habitats, and you have all of these risk by disturbance types, from scour and erosion and flooding and landslides and wind and transportation and construction. And so just raising the understanding of how things spread with stream flow roads, equipment, hill slope processes, and weather. So that folks start looking at it not just as green or yellow with a flower or pink with a flower, but actually a risk and a hazard to what they're doing. And over the years, we've created quite the data collection process and the data sets. Folks like Alana and Devin and Olivia and Mike work continuously managing our data, but our data is also, so we're a science-based organization, and we are collecting the data to be able to understand the processes, impacts, and efficacy of treatments and spread across landscapes and how these plants are acting within the plant communities that we care about or on the species that we care about. So our data gets used by a number of different researchers. It's a lot to manage, and we keep doing it. And one of the things we do it for, of course, is research. And so we're starting to do research on Scotch broom and reed canary grass. We've worked with Lauren Keeney and Efficient on a research project that I'll talk more about. We need to do research on herb Robert and its allelopathy, apparent allelopathy. The salmon recovery folks say there is no way that such a little plant could harm salmon recovery, could harm salmon and be a salmon recovery issue. But you see it taking over and replacing all the other species. And so there's something going on there. And it's probably one of the species that we put the most time in on certain rivers. And we're looking at Scotch broom and its biogeomorphic influence of how sediment moves through watersheds and how it survives droughts and floods, and is becoming a real problem on rivers, and open gravel bars, just like it is in gravel mines, and then glacial retreat. So working with partners to inform the resiliency and passive restoration goals of all of us. And as we're taking all that data and we have all these points and polygons, we have over the years gotten the RCO to understand that surveys are part of the treatment. We have to be able to survey and be paid to go out and survey 5,000, 4,000, 5,000 acres to treat less than 1 acre of a species to be able to stop that species from spreading again, from one set of rhizomes that gets scoured out and torn up and floated out and dropped. And so we track, but then we have to analyze each point and polygon for what was actually treated within that. So that's what we call condensed acres. And thanks to all the staff that work so hard to collect and organize and manage and analyze this data. So that's this is for knotweed. In 2020, we surveyed many acres in that's the middle Hoh from the South Fork Hoh confluence down to the Oxbow, surveyed about 2,000 acres of land to get just 3/10 of an acre of knotweed. And then in 2025, it's about the same amount of knotweed in that same area. So the knotweed is not disappearing. It's low, but we have to do a lot of work to find it and treat it. And as you see in this, so here we have a ton of pink, which is herb robert, a lot of yellow, which is Scotch broom, a fair amount of knotweed, which is red, a lot of reed canary grass, which is bright green. And here we have less of the bright green. We have more Scotch broom, and still a lot of herb robert in particular spaces, in particular sites. And then we got funding, Lauren Keeney from Efficient, and I worked on a proposal to the Western Invasive Plant Management Group at UC California, for funding to analyze the 20 plus years of spatial data that we had on all our knotweed. And she summarized the lessons learned from all the management and control efforts. And that is available. There's a link below at the bottom of this slide, and I can put it in the chat as well. Or if you go to our website and go to the Hoh River restoration tab, you'll find a link at the bottom to this. Oops. So the data that she analyzed altogether just showed that the survey and control effort is ongoing and has to be just as intensive, and that there's been a biomass reduction over the years in terms of clusters, stems, and height, but that the lateral and upland spread has slightly gone up in terms of going out across the entire channel migration zone, and in some places into upland sites as it gets brought with equipment or people or animals. And then there's a nice table, which is way too much to go over, but that she summarized adaptive management from all of our reports over the 6 years between 2002 and 2008, and just talks about how we changed our methods on knotweed over time, and how the trends were continuing, and that the work was not done. And I was able to show her how there are highlighted areas on the river migration patterns where I know now where to look for knotweed. It's at the top end of the bars where the wood is blocking the flow, and the flow goes over the log jams and it drops whatever it's carrying. And the upstream end of the migration bars is always where you find knotweed. And so that would be like here or in here, and the side channel coming through here. So as I started to say earlier, we have identified lots of other species to work on. We're working on 22 species on the Hoh River now. 5 of them are EDRR. We have stopped everlasting pea vine or everlasting pea or perennial pea, Lathyrus latifolia, by getting individual plants or very small clumps of plants on the roadsides where they've been brought in by equipment doing road work or riprap work or culvert work. We've stopped 4 sites in the last 4 years, and they have not gotten into the river from what we know. We stopped 1 spotted jewelweed site that was probably planted accidentally by a recreational user, a tourist, maybe from Wisconsin. And we've been tracking a 1/2 acre to 2 acres of scattered spotted jewelweed on the Hoh River at River Mile 20, I'm guessing 27, and have not found any seedlings anywhere else, but it is exploding everywhere else. So we're really worried about that. We stopped wild chervil, 1 plant from East Jefferson County to the Upper Hoh Road. And I'm not catching, we had 1 more that we stopped. But I'm gonna go back to that slide. Sorry. So we're using the phrase natural climate solutions to continue to build projects. And as Justin pointed out, we are always phasing our projects. We always do grants that talk about a project as phase 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're in phase 7 of PTIR. And that enables us not to go back and build off of what we did before and make the case that we're not just applying to do a new project, but we're continuing work that is not over.
Hey,
And we're
Jill,
combining.
sorry to interrupt, but your overtime
Thank you. I
for
didn't know. Okay, I'm almost done. Um, we're combining forest thinning and scotch broom and biochar pyrolysis to do soil remediation, and we're advocating 10% of every restoration and construction project going to a conservation corps. And that's for you all to think about too. If you would ask every partner that you have to put 10% towards invasives, you could have funding to do a review, you could do recommendations, and you could do the work with the funding that comes through other types of restorations, culverts, um, riparian revegetation. So we're working on a coastal conservation corps or a carbon or a climate conservation corps, permanent place-based year-round, locally staffed to do all these things that are in the boxes. But invasives would be a big piece of that. Continuous place-based, not 2-year cycles like WCC or AmeriCorps, but folks who live here like we have. And we are always matching local skilled experience with youth in training. And there's Devin and the crew at Baker Bar working on Scotch Room. Notice how there's no willow and alder in there except for dead willow and alder. That's what Scotch Room does. And we have lots of partners to whom we are eternally grateful and collaborators and our project sponsors. Thanks so much to everybody that supports and contributes to what we do and gives us access. So that's it. Native plants really are the answer.